All right, guys, we're going to start creating a line graph by drawing the x and the y axis. So I'm going to draw my y axis first. Remember, my y axis goes up and down, and then my x axis goes across the bottom, the horizontal, and I'm just going to label them x and y. The next thing that I want to do is to go ahead and put what I'm going to put on my x and y axis. And we know with line graphs, we always have time across the x-axis. Time always goes across the bottom. And so my time, if you're looking at my data, which is up here in this top hand corner, I'm using the average high temperature and average low temperatures in Cherry Point for the months of January through June. So my time piece here is months. So time could be days, hours, weeks, years, but in this case it is months. So I'm going to put just like the first letter of each month to make it easy on myself, because writing on this is difficult. April, May, and then last is June. Not the neatest, but I'm doing what I can. And then at the bottom, I'm going to put my label, which is months. And then going up across my y-axis, the other piece of information or data that I have is the temperature, the degrees. And so what I want to do is look at what's my lowest number and then what's my highest number to make sure that I do my scale correctly. And my scale is kind of like the numbers that I have on my y-axis and how many I go up by. That's my scale. So I'm seeing like my lowest number is 35 and my highest number looks like 85. So I know I need to start right here with 35, and top one is going to be 85. Now you're not always going to put those as your top and bottom numbers. They were on 5s and I'm going to skip count. So they just worked out well. I also want to remember to label my origin. That's always going to be 0, and origin starts with the O, so you can just kind of remember that's your origin. That's where everything originates. And then I'm also going to put my label across my y-axis, and I'm going to put temp for short for temperature. And I'm going to skip count. I'm thinking I'm going to skip count by tens. So 35, 45, 55, 65, 75. So my drawing again is not perfect, but I tried my best to kind of keep the same amount of space between each numbers. If I don't do that, my data is going to look all kinds of wonky. It's not really going to make sense. So I'm going to record my high temperatures first. So starting with January, my high temperature was average high temperature was 55 degrees. So down here on my x-axis, I'm finding the J for January, and then I'm going to go up my y-axis until I get to 55, and I'm going to make a point right there just so I can keep track of it. And my next month was February with 58, so I'm going across my x-axis to the F for February and then up my y-axis to 58. Uh-oh, I don't have 58 exactly on my y-axis, so I'm going to have to kind of think about where 58 would be. So 55, 56, 57, 58. So 58's it's a lot closer to 55 than it is 65. So I'm just going to have it a little bit higher here. And again, it's not going to be perfect, but I'm doing my best to make it as close as possible. And next is March, which is 65. March and up to 65. Again, I want to make it as close as possible. April was 73 degrees, so that's closer to 75 than it is 65. So I'm going to have it not quite up to the 75, just below it. May is 79, so that's going to be almost right directly in between 75 and 85. So that's about 79 there. Oh, that's actually a little high. Let me erase it. That was a little bit too high. Go back. And here. It looks a little better. And last but not least, June was at 85, and that was my very top one. And so now to make it a line graph, I need to connect these dots to have a line. And you can see that the temperatures steadily increased between the months of January and June, which is what it does. It gets warmer when we get into the months of June because that's the summer. And so now I'm going to switch my colors just so it's easier for me to keep up with. And I'm going to do my average low temperature. And so it gets pretty cold here in January. So the average low was 35. So again, I'm going to go to my J on my x-axis for January. And then I'm going to go up my y-axis to the number 35, which is at the very bottom. And I marked 35 there. And then it only goes up a little bit for February for 37. So February, I'm just going to mark a teeny tiny up a little bit there. And March, we have a high of 43. So still not quite to that next mark yet, but just a little bit below the 45 mark. April was 51. So not all the way up to 55, just a little bit below 55. May was 60, so that's directly in between 55 and 65. And then June, the average low temperature was about 68. So that's just a little bit above 65. So I'm gonna do my dot there. Ooh, whoops. Let me try that again a little bit neater. Put it right here. And again, I need to connect my dots so I have my line for my line graph. And you can see there's a pretty big jump between March and April. So that must be when our temperatures start warming on up. And that makes sense because we know spring starts around that time. All right, this is how we create a line graph based on data.